Good morning, everyone. I think that's us just past the hour. It's my pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to our audience this morning. Still more people dripping in, which is great. I appreciate you joining us today, and we'll look forward to a really exciting webinar. The theme this morning is AI leadership for IT operations. And we're going to demonstrate and showcase and do a lot of discussion this morning around pioneering change with voice, image, and text technologies. The reality is that there are very few people that are true experts in AI. It's such a vast and complex field. In fact, a client that I recently worked with compared AI to healthcare. In that if you wanted the best outcomes for your health, you'd visit a GP. You'd discuss your symptoms, and there you would be referred to the right specialist. Well, at Robotics AI, we see ourselves as the GP for AI, where we consult with our clients, we diagnose the pain points, and we connect them with the right AI specialists to deliver real business outcomes and solutions. Well, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome two of those AI experts along with me this morning. So welcome Will Harris from Accelerate and Horia Radoy from DRUID AI. Would you both like to say hello to the audience?
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having us, Russ.
Yeah, my pleasure. So perhaps we can move into setting the scene for the history of AI then. Really to give our audience a bit of an understanding around where this industry has been hiding for decades and why all of a sudden, whenever we switch the television on, we are bombarded with AI stories in our living room. Will, perhaps you can do that for us.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. So quite an interesting thing I find about AI is it's really not new. New AI is very new. It's the latest thing. We all know this in our businesses, in our daily lives. It's everywhere. But the term AI is really quite old, right? A lot of people will be well aware, especially the audience for this webinar being IT and tech professionals, be well aware as to who Alan Turing is and the development of the Turing test in the 1950s. And that was really the first advent of the concept of artificial intelligence. The term was first used around 1955 in a set of lectures in the US and led to the creation of deterministic algorithms. What a lot of people don't realize is the first chatbot was actually created in 1966. Her name was Elisa, and she was a psychotherapist, for what it's worth. You could go, well, not anyone could go and talk to him, because of course it lived in a lab, in a machine where you still needed a white coat to interact with it, but it could have a natural language conversation within barriers to you about mental health and psychological complications. So I think that's fascinating that that's in the 1960s. There was quite a winter of AI then, really, until we got into the late 80s and early 90s and started going beyond posturing around neural networks and started playing with them, developing them. And the first big advent of this, I suppose, would be around 2011 and the release of Siri, which I can't say too loud in this room, or a load of machines will pop up and think that I'm talking to them. And that really was showing the first advent of machine learning, reinforced learning, and the use of certain neural networks. Now, that was what, 2011? I mean, maybe before that, you could say Deep Blue in 1997, the famous chess machine from IBM that could beat Garry Kasparov, but that was still really deterministic. And then AlphaGo a little bit after it. But there was that shift from deterministic AI into machine learning neural networks around that 2011 timeframe. So we're talking the best part of 50 years this stuff had existed before we made the first shift. The second shift, everyone will be well aware of, right? November 2022, the move to ChatGPT, large language models, OpenAI, of course, releasing it, and now plenty of opportunity on the market, actually based on a 2017 white paper titled All You Need Is Attention. So that's really when the transform model started thinking. But you can see these timelines compressing. And now, Russ, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about how phenomenal it was in history for elements to get up to 100 million users. I mean, what was the example you were giving us with the internet? And
yeah, we're looking at the history of innovation, and I think 1991 was the first website, and to capture 100 million users took till 97, I think, something like that, 6 years. And then the iPhone came along, and similar sort of years to get to 100 million users. And then we look at the fast adoption of AI and ChatGPT, and we're talking weeks, weren't we, to get to that 100 million.
Yeah, it's like 5 or 6 days till ChatGPT had 100 million users. Incredible pace of change, and I think that's what's fueling. And the reason I bring that up here is that's what's fueling not why AI, but why AI now. If AI is so old, why have we not cared so much about it, other than specific sectors of particular industries up until the last 18 24 months? And the World Economic Forum, of course, talk about it as being in this fourth industrial revolution, as we have been since 2018. Personally, I prefer to see it more as the third age of AI. As I explained earlier, we have the first age, deterministic, the second age, neural networks, the third age, into transform model, and you see those timelines compressing. If I use an analogy and we think about aviation, was it 1904, something like that? The Wright brothers created the Wright Flyer. Cool, right? It was in the press. No one really cared. It wasn't going to affect their life. It's a bit like 1953 and saying AI or ELISA in the 60s. Awesome. Well done, scientists. You're spending lots of money doing something that's not going to affect my life at all. Then you get into Deep Blue and especially Siri. Okay, this is interesting. Like, this might affect me. Is it a toy? Is it something I can interact with? How much is it going to affect my daily life? If we go back to aviation, this is a bit like World War II, the Spitfire, of course, being the probably the most famous aircraft that come from that. Still not really going to affect civilian lives outside of course, any form of conflict. You're never going to get to fly in one. But interesting, it was less than 21 years. Again, the condensing of timeline, 50 plus from the Wright Flyer to the Spitfire, just over 20 from the Spitfire to the Concorde. If you don't believe me, go look that up. The Spitfire flying to the first flight of the Concorde was only a 21-year difference. And we're seeing the same thing again with AI, a real compression. Now, the Concorde to me is just a representative vehicle of excellence in aviation, but it really marks global travel. No one here today would think twice about getting on an airplane and flying somewhere on holiday or flying somewhere for a business meeting. Whereas in the first 2 ages of aviation, no one could do it. Very similar to AI. First age of AI, interesting to scientists. Second age of AI, interesting to professionals, but how's it really going to affect my life? Third age of AI, everyone is using it. You don't need degrees in computer science or mathematics now to build really complicated models and capabilities with what's recently been released in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think we're starting to see that huge explosion of people adopting it and using it for really novel purposes. And again, I draw that analogy back to global aviation and why businesses need to care about it now.
Amazing. And it's just fascinating to see, the speed of adoption and the real practical use cases in organizations as well. And, it doesn't matter the age demographic. When you go down and speak to your family, your friends, somebody has got an AI story that they're now presenting in the conversation. So I use AI for this. And the reality is that they've probably been using AI for much longer than they anticipated. But now they're getting to, touch and feel AI and getting to see some of the value that it brings, which is amazing. It's a real history of AI, a quick run through in a few minutes there just to help, present that for our audience, which many will know that anyway, especially from a technical perspective as well. So let's move into the next part of our agenda then. That's a nice sort of segue. And what we want to focus on in this part is our UK government's latest AI action plan. So you might be aware on the 13th of January, the UK government announced this action plan. And really it was a strategy designed to accelerate AI adoption across industries, whilst ensuring that there is responsible development for AI. 5 key focus areas in that piece was boosting AI adoption in business, strengthening the AI skills and talent, supporting AI research and innovation, fostering international collaboration, and ensuring that AI is deployed safely and securely with the right regulations around it. So really we see in that strategic plan that there are opportunities for growth, for business, for improving public services and consumers' life, helping the UK be number 1 in their leadership role, and support a variety of SMEs as well. So, really my takeaway from looking at it at a high level was a real pro-innovation approach, which was amazing to see that look, we really want to adopt AI. We want innovation to come forward. We want business and companies to innovate and adopt, but we also want to have that balance with a fair regulatory approach as well. So, well, I've given you a few questions just to sort of get your opinion on it and formulate some responses as well. So, maybe I failed to say in the introduction of this that there's a chat bot, a speaker chat box in our webinar today. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them forward. If we've got time, we'll either answer them as we go along or we'll answer them near the end. That's the purpose. We've got experts on this call. Let's use this opportunity to ask those questions. So, well, let's think about our first question then. So what's your thoughts on this, the UK's approach to balancing AI innovation with regulation as outlined in that action plan?
Yeah, so Russ, you and I know each other pretty well. For anyone who doesn't know, my degree is in law. I actually came into technology from a commercial side rather than growing up as a developer. And for the last 20 odd years, I've not really been able to use my law degree much outside of commercial conversations. So it's actually nice to blow off some cobwebs and actually have to read a piece of legislation and try and think, well, what does this mean for me? Of course, when the EU AI Act came out, and then overlay that thought process to the 50 recommendations from this report. So there's quite a bit in my mind. I try and distill it down. There's two sides to the equation, right? First of all, actually, it's good to see a government actually paying attention to the existence of this technology and thinking about how is a populace going to consume it, or should we be increasing barriers to entry, reducing barriers to entry, etc. What does that mean for us? Question mark. We'll come back to that in a minute. There's the other side then, the actual practical application of what these 50 recommendations are, and hopefully they'll make their way through into legislation or funds or whatever it may be in order to enable it. I appreciate they're split into 5. When you read the summary report, they split into 5. I try and think of them in 3 specific categories. So first is there's a definite intent to invest in the foundations of AI, that walk before you can run. If we don't have a good foundational platform in the UK, then we will be consistently dependent on other regions of the world to service our needs, but we'll also naturally lag behind in the skills and capability required to be at the forefront of emerging technologies, not just the development of these models and capabilities, but the real world application. It's one thing for everyone to be able to go and spend $20 a month and have access to ChatGPT and ask some quite cool questions, but what does this mean for an insurance company or a bank or a healthcare provider or a mine or a shipping company? How are they going to adopt it and commercialize it? And I think investing in those foundations will create an environment where experimentation is welcomed, as well as start creating the real capability that we need in the years coming to scale these solutions. The second bit then for me is, how does this action plan set out to embrace AI for good, or embrace how AI is going to impact our lives? And I think this is really where we see a lot of commentary about how we're going to regulate for it. The government's previous political affiliations don't matter whatsoever here, but government's previous, predominantly because of how new these technologies were, rightly took a fairly cautious approach. And you see that in how acts at the EU level have been written for a long time. GDPR, obviously, good intent, poorly written, in my opinion. EU AI Act, great intent, some real complications with its genuine application. So it's good to see the UK government taking a stance that regulation will be important, but not at the total cost of innovation. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that actually flows through into statute, and whether we become more aligned with a US approach to it in, let's focus on how we can derive good business, but with a European flavor on it, that let's make sure we're looking after the populace that we serve. And then the third piece that I think it boils down into is really securing that homegrown AI. This is where they start talking about data centers, investment in energy. There is that dark side to artificial intelligence, if you will, that people don't think about the energy consumption of using a ChatGPT or a Llama or a Mistral or whatever it may be. And it is at a geopolitical level a real big problem. Microsoft, of course, investing 20 billion in building a nuclear reactor solely to service the energy requirements of their AI capability. And there's a lot of recommendations in there about how we will, at a national level, support the infrastructure requirements to really leverage this. And then that all wraps into the creation of AI growth areas. Conveniently, the first at Culham Science Centre in Oxfordshire. It's about 4 miles that way for me, which is quite convenient. It's nice to see they're creating these communities, but I wait with anticipation to see how that flows through to what it really means for business above and beyond what we can already do today.
Amazing. Thanks, Will. Thanks for those insights. And I remember recently I attended the Scottish AI Alliance meet up just a few months ago, and there's a comment there around regulation. If you take the automobile industry as an example, the car industry, it took 70 years before it became law for people to put a seatbelt on when they were driving cars. And in that time, of course, there's a lot of tragedy in that time. But now the world's a better place for that regulation. Now we hope that, of course, AI is not going to take 70 years to catch up with the innovation. So it's important to discuss it and have it as a key element today, but not at the expense of innovation. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree.
Good. So how effectively do you feel the plan addresses AI adoption in some key areas or key industries like healthcare, finance, or public services?
So certainly in public services, there's very forthright intent to adopt, and by extension, I think into the NHS. There's still the big complication for me is around how we treat data, and I think there needs to be some legislative and regulatory change in how we interpret the use of data and when it's fair use. I had previously worked with an organization who had developed a predictive algorithm. This predates ChatGPT. This was around 2017 for what it's worth, using some really advanced techniques then that could accurately predict heart failure in a particular demographic, happened to be Caucasian males 35 to 65 years and old, and were very accurate in predicting heart failure, and in fact saved a number of lives. I didn't lead the program, I was involved in the program, so it's not me that needs to be thanked, so that organization. However, one of the people who was saved subsequently petitioned the ICO to shut the program down for improper processing of their personal data. And in the court hearing, the person who was pointed out to them that their life was saved by the processing of this data, but by how the law was written, they were quite correct. It was processed without correct consideration, without correct process in place, and the program was shut down. If I read the recommendations, they're aiming at changes to laws like that, where the greater good would outweigh the individual sanctimony of one person. And with that comes some risk, but some great reward, because as we all know on this call, AI is driven by data. AI is an engine, data is the fuel. If you put bad fuel in a great engine, you get poor performance, right? So I think a lot of it is around, and what they're talking about in the public space is making available better, clean data sets that allow you to utilize the power of this technology. And then that in itself gives more confidence to the populace that AI is supporting them, and naturally reduces a lot of the barriers to applying it to more complex use cases inside any other business.
Yeah, amazing. And I think I read that the part of the plan was to create this national data library where you've got AI researchers and innovators collaborating on public data sets, anonymized data sets. And I think NHS was like, front and central of that. We've got all this content and data, for healthcare. Why are we not using it? Let's get access to it. Let's do something meaningful with it, in a safe and secure environment, but having the ability to deliver real innovation and outcomes, which is, just highlighting your point. So I think maybe in the benefit of time, Will, maybe do you want to just give us a bit of a summary or feedback on the AI action plan in general, rather than going at the next couple of questions?
Yeah, sure. So look, it's good that we're thinking. It's good that the UK are thinking about it. No, nothing bad can come from focusing on something, right? If we find that the application of it is not correct and it restricts innovation in certain areas, then that in the test of time is likely to be a good thing. But at least all 50 of the recommendations are structured to better enable British businesses, and by extension, a global business that operates in the UK, to adopt this technology at a pace that keeps us at least competitive with the rest of the world. Now, the plan talks a lot about the UK being a bastion and being a world leader in it. We'll see. I would love for that to be the case. But at the moment, as long as we can stay on par with some of the other big players, then it puts us in a net much better position than we already are. I saw in fact, sent to me as a meme, a joke by a friend of mine who's not in AI, but perceives me as his AI friend, sent me this Venn diagram. A lot of people would have seen it. If you hadn't, I'll find it and put it up here. It's quite funny. It's 3 circles, 2 connected to Venn diagram, 1 disconnected. The 2 up here are red and blue, China and the US. And inside the Venn diagrams are all the things that the US are leading on, drones and whatnot, all the things that China are leading on, facial recognition, all the things that are about the same in the middle of large language foundational models. Quite actually interesting. And then the one at the bottom just had EU written in it and just the word regulation. So it's like we need to get to a point where we've got some other words in our Venn diagram. And I think that the Act is ultimately going to help us head in the right direction of being able to better adopt this technology in business.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for joining, Will, and thanks for those insight. And my summary was this is a robust AI framework that's in place to help the advancement of AI, but really the success from it will be dependent on executing it effectively, considering some of the things that we've not talked about just in the benefit of time, like the environmental concerns and the electricity, water consumption, but also ensuring that the investment is not 2025 and that's it. Like, good night. We've invested in AI and that's it. It's this long-term strategic approach that will really continue to harness value from it across organizations. Okay, so let's transition into the theme of our webinar then, really, which is focusing on IT operations. And we've got a large technical audience with us today. Really recognizing that AI has got the potential to streamline IT operations, make customers and colleagues' life somewhat easier. We're going to consider some of the use cases. So, well, why don't you just sort of set the scene a little bit around the ITOps piece?
Yeah, sure. So bring it away from that sort of more existential conversation of what do the recommendations mean, what do the Act mean, what's the UK doing with AI. Let's focus on what are we currently as technologists, and try and focus down on that IT department and the peripheries of it doing. So agentic AI and AI agents, 2 slightly separate things, but 4 people with my view on that, are at the forefront of everything that's being spoken about at the moment. But they're not just academic. These things are deployed, they're live, they're in many businesses, they're not in every business. If they're not in your business, don't feel that you're massively behind, but trust me, they are in some of your competitors' business and proven. And what we mean by an AI agent is the intersection of IT operations, the running of your IT department, DevOps, the creation of new elements that can include AI, but not specifically for AI, your machine learning operations, and then generative AI, how all that comes together to create IT specific, AI agents. The thing that's important to me about an agent and where it differs from just an LLM or just say an RPA protocol is its ability to have agency and be able to make a decision based upon the data set it's provided with. And that is a variable data set. You don't necessarily know what's going to come in the front end, but it has to be able to take action on that. And that's where the front end integrations matter. How do you communicate with this agent? Could it be phone, Teams, Slack, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, whatever it is? And then what value do we get out of the AI taking a piece of action on behalf of an IT department? So to frame it, that's when I'm thinking about agentic AI or AI agents inside IT. This sort of slide on the screen really sort of frames where my mind's at. Now, we were speaking, Russ, that there's a couple different ways when we get into an IT department and understand the quantum of data and knowledge that has to exist across this department, whether it's a department of thousands of people at a major corporation, or hundreds of people at a mid-sized business, or a handful of people in a smaller business. There is a huge amount of information that needs to be consumed. And broadly, there are 2 ways of doing that. A lot of people would have heard of Gemini 2, the million token model. This is one way of solving for it. So if we take a normal foundational model, a large language model, and ask it to summarize a large quantum of data, let's take an example a lot of people would know, like the Harry Potter books. You feed it one Harry Potter book and ask it to summarize. It would actually read each individual chapter, summarize the chapter, then read all the summaries and summarize the summaries to you, which means it misses a lot of nuance. Now, you can't do that if you're looking at an architectural diagram or you're looking at the rules pertaining to security on edge devices in your infrastructure. You have to be precise. So one of the ways of solving it, and the way that Google are taking, is wide context models. So instead of looking at one Harry Potter book and one chapter at a time, Gemini 2 could look at all 9 of the books and likely another 100 books behind that as well, and summarize to extremely fine points of information hidden within that data. Brilliant. Downside, wildly expensive to interact with, because you're using hundreds of thousands or millions of tokens every time you interact with it. So what's the solution to getting a similar outcome, so your AI understands your business, not just general ITIL principles, but how you've set your business up, or you've set up your support desk, or your infrastructure, or security, or storage, or whatever it may be? Then we start looking at swarm intelligence. So actually you can use a narrow context, because you build a bot that specializes in, say in this diagram, ITIL reporting, another one that specializes in provisioning virtual machines, another one that specializes in ad hoc requests like password requests or simple end user device requests. And you then swarm these agents together. Now that's cheaper and still just as accurate, but introduce another complication that you now need to be able to orchestrate them, because you don't want to have to tell your employees, here are the 65 different AI IT people you can go speak to. You need to know which one to find. So then we need to think about AI agent orchestration. And that's what I'm trying to present here. And Horia from DRUID will probably talk to a little bit, because it's a capability in that platform. But having a single point where you can go in with a wide array of complexity, and that orchestrator understands where to direct that request, what specific agent it needs to leverage in order to achieve your outcome.
Well, do you mind? I'll just jump in at this point. If you go back, let's look at this slide, because my observation is when we're speaking to customers and prospects, they have a particular pain point in their organization, and they're saying, right, what's the right AI solution? Is it off the shelf? Is it no cost? Is it something we're already using? How do we regulate it, make it secure, etc.? One of the challenges, and Microsoft have sort of promoted this UI for AI capability, where you type into Copilot and it starts doing your AI, but that's if it's within Copilot or if it's within ChatGPT. What we're saying here is this is an AI agent orchestration platform. Just correct my understanding if I'm wrong, that you can connect any type of capability, platform, system, ERP with a AI capability, and it's the single user interface, and you can communicate with that and however you want to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. And to expand on that, so it doesn't need to only interact with other AI capabilities. If you have a system of record, an ERP, a CRM that doesn't have an AI capability, you can create an AI capability in here that would directly integrate either at the user interface layer or at the API layer with that piece of technology. But let's take any given mid to large size company will likely have multiple technologies deployed across their estates. You might have Salesforce and you're consuming Einstein in Salesforce. That's brilliant. Cool. That's great on your Salesforce data. O365, you've got your Copilot. Maybe you're so advanced you have some custom Copilot work going on, but it's only servicing your O365 estate. Then you bring in ServiceNow and you've got an AI capability inside ServiceNow. You still have to go to 3 different places if you want to get things done, and they will only get things done inside the repository in which they sit. So you have to have this orchestration layer at the top, because if I wanted to ask a question about a customer, an order, a project that they have going on, and get a 360 view of them, I'm going to need some information, maybe out of Dynamics, maybe out of something in O365. I might need some information out of Salesforce. I might need some information out of Sage. I might need some information out of a project management software for something that's already or Jira or whatever, for something that's already going on. And I don't want to have to go to each individual one that individually saying we've got AI for that. I want to be able to ask at the top level, go do this for me. And I think that's where we move away from AI enabled workflow into AI agents, which are the stepping stone into agentic AI, where now I can ask a general helper and it will interact with the orchestration system.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for qualifying that. And then let's move into these sort of final use cases. And then I know Horia is sitting in the wings.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing what Horia has to show us. So I mean, but again, stepping stones, and I of course we've seen a bit of what Horia is going to show us in a minute, and it gets much more complex than this. But to food for thought in where AI agents and in some states agentic AI are deployed live with real world customers working with real world end users across a multiple of areas inside ITOps, right? So service requests, obviously, if we can automate service requests, anyone in here who's an IT director or an ITIL service manager or has ever been one, when you're doing your monthly or quarterly reporting to the CIO or to wherever the reports go, the amount of service requests, when you do your analysis on that, the amount that are just innocuous, right? Some of this can be done with RPA, but if it's in different language, I don't mean French and English. I mean, if you're using colloquialism, if you're using slang in how you're making these requests, then it's hard to teach an RPA bot a lot of that. So how can we use AI to understand service requests? In the first instance, just get rid of the chaff and keep the wheat. But it does go further than that. It can be really complicated stuff. Help desk, then really the introduction of voice and being able to speak to it in multiple actual languages and with different colloquial terms. Or live chat, very popular on commercial websites. I haven't actually seen that many IT departments that have built a live chat functionality that doesn't just go straight through to an end user or to a scripted FAQ knowledge base. How do I reset my password? Here is the file on resetting your password. Why can't it be, hi, I've forgotten my password, it authenticates you and then just puts you straight into the area where it says type new password in twice, right? That's the sort of stuff that we're doing now with those sorts of live chat capabilities. And then of course reporting, although reporting is an interesting one to me. I had a lot of value when I was a chief digital officer at a previous organization, being able to use AI to gather reports, because it can plug into large numbers of underlying databases and you can ask it a single question, right? As an example, return to me the business I've conducted with Robotics AI in the trailing 12 months. Now, it might need to go to 5 or 6 systems to find that, but it understands the intent of my question and will return that data. And if I've set it up to generate me a PDF or API that out to Power BI and create me a report, it allows you to interrogate huge quantums of data using natural language without the need to have lots of analysts and support around you. Really useful for me when I was looking at reporting. And then, of course, end user compute, right? I think it'd be they're food for thought. I think Horia is going to show us this in action in a bit, but that's to me a smorgasbord of opportunity just inside ITOps before we even look at the broader IT landscape or business landscape.
Amazing, thank you so much. And we recognise that we've talked a lot around theory so far in this webinar, but we felt it was important just to have this conversation to set the scene nicely for us. We recognise that IT teams play a crucial role in AI adoption. Not only are they the gatekeepers for technology, but they're also going to be responsible for ensuring that any AI solutions are scalable across the business, that they're secure and ultimately aligned with those key business goals. So let's move away from concept and move into reality now, and we'll invite Horia to join us. And we'll just hand over to Horia, and you can showcase some of the use cases that you have to demonstrate with the audience this morning.
Thank you very much. So the first use case, in line with what Will and Ross you've already talked about, will basically show a voice-based interaction in multiple languages, whereby an end user asks questions in natural language to a virtual assistant, to an AI agent, and the AI agent pulls the relevant information and provides, again, in natural language, the answers back to the human. So let me know if you can't hear this, but...
Hello there, Horia. I am your DRUID IT Help Desk Conversational Assistant. How can I help you today?
Can you please check the status of my laptop replacement?
I will gladly help you check the status of your ticket. Your last update is, from today, Windows installation done. Next step is, installing Microsoft Office 360. Estimated time for complete laptop replacement is 24 hours.
I also want to open a ticket to install Outlook.
There is no need for that. Microsoft Outlook is installed as part of the next step, installing Microsoft Office 360.
How can I talk to a DRUID conversational assistant?
You are talking to a DRUID conversational assistant right now. You can ask me anything, or chat with me on the internal channels like Microsoft Teams or by accessing the intranet homepage and looking for me on the bottom right-hand side corner of your screen.
Can you speak Spanish?
Por supuesto.
¿Cómo puedo comunicarme con una asistente de conversación?
Estás hablando con un asistente de conversación DRUID en este momento. Puedes preguntarme cualquier cosa, o chatear conmigo en los canales internos como Microsoft Teams o accediendo a la página de inicio de la intranet y buscándome en la esquina inferior derecha de tu pantalla.
Can you please send me all P1 incident reports?
Let me start a UiPath process to generate the report for you. I will email these to you.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
So two important aspects here are the fact that, one, the virtual assistant can be accessed on any channel, so this is not only limited to voice. The same experience can happen in an omni-channel approach. So even if the user were communicating with the virtual assistant from a channel like Microsoft Teams, from a web interface, as most people are interacting with virtual assistants nowadays. Basically, the bot can provide this information in any of the channels on which the user is expecting this interaction to happen. Second, by putting the virtual assistant in front of these of the already existing systems within the enterprise, the virtual assistant knows what systems it is required to connect to, so it is able to pull the information about the existing ticket, pull the status information for a particular ticket, as well as starting backend processes in certain applications. So there's no limitation, basically, as long as the application, as the backend application being used has an interface available, the virtual assistant can connect to it and start executing processes on those systems, pull data, push data. So basically, it becomes the personal assistant of the various users.
I like how you put that, Haria, because it really is. You know, I've used a digital assistant, a virtual assistant. In many ways, we've moved away from this murky world of chatbot. But to call it a personal assistant is the reality of what this technology now is.
So for the second demonstration, I will have a virtual assistant that helps out with virtual machine provisioning. So the process this was developed for basically entailed, for human-to-human interactions, multiple emails being sent between an end user and a DevOps engineer. Basically, the bot takes a task that would otherwise take hours, or, as I said before, multiple email exchanges, and helps the user, guides the user who speaks or chats, in this case, with the virtual assistant in their natural language. Basically, the bot understands the human's requests, provides guidance, for instance, for items such as cost optimization, resource allocation optimization, as well as localization, and basically helps the user in provisioning two resources in this case, in the Azure infrastructure, a virtual machine and a database. Most of the time, you would think of this task as being highly technical, but as an end user, as an IT director, as a lead in a software development team, sometimes you may just need this machine to test out particular processes. So the virtual assistant can take in the laborious task of the DevOps engineer communicating with the end user, teaching and educating the end user at times, basically the virtual assistant takes on this task and helps the end user with the basic information, the end result being a Terraform file, which then a DevOps engineer can simply review, identify if or that the data collected by the virtual assistant is the correct one, and then put in the Terraform requirement onto the CI/CD pipeline in order to start provisioning this machine. So all of a sudden, the job of the DevOps engineer no longer is that of understanding and educating the end user, but rather that of monitoring and ensuring that the data collected by the virtual assistant is correct. And for processes where this has been tested, this has worked on, the whole process can simply go on the existing CI/CD pipeline in order to basically to automate the task end to end. So in this case, the virtual assistant will be available for the end users. In this case, it is available in the platform, but as I mentioned before, this can be deployed in any of the channels used within the enterprise. So in this case, the user simply asks for an application, specifies some of their base requirements, and then the bot will ask the relevant questions that the DevOps engineer put in front of it in order to generate a meaningful file that can then be taken and put on the regular business processes. So the first step where the virtual assistant proves useful is by understanding where the user's application is going to be deployed. The virtual assistant right now will identify the best location so that the latency will be the smallest between the regions that the user provided. So it not only intakes that information, but it can also infer from it and take the correct decisions. You will notice that the language used by the end user is not a highly specialized one. So basically, the user will simply provide their input, and the virtual assistant will take that input and turn it into meaningful data. So in this case, the user chimes in, requests a more powerful machine, so the bot will take that whole information into consideration. The bot is also aware of contextual information. For instance, when asked what is the cost for that particular option, the bot understands that we're looking at the D4 compared to the D2. Hence, it will be able to provide a comparative analysis between the two of them. So the bot will simply go through the required steps, identifies again that the user does not need fast data retrieval, hence optimizes the, let's call it the best option in this case, the hard drive versus the solid state drive. Provides the recommendation to the user, but then it is the task of the user to choose which of the options is going to be the correct one. Notice here that the user suddenly decides, well, I no longer want to use Europe Central, I want to use Europe UK as the region. The bot takes in that information, updates the output for the user, and then we move on to provisioning the database. For the database, the bot again puts on the hat of an advisor, where if the user asks, well, which one works best with the Windows operating system, the bot recommends the Azure SQL database. Again, helping out with cost, helping out with resource allocation, as well as helping out the user so that the initial setup will not require or will require minimal interventions once this is deployed. So once we have the finalized information, the the human user will simply ask for the Terraform file. Now, for the purposes of the bot, the Terraform file will be generated inside the chat. However, as I mentioned earlier, this can automatically be hooked into the CI/CD pipeline. So and basically adapt to the business requirements that that the enterprise has. If we want human validation, the file can be put forth in user interface where the DevOps engineer can look over, validate that everything is okay, and then approve it. Or if particular business requirements are in place, for instance, if the cost is within a certain margin, this generated file can automatically be approved and put on the CI/CD pipeline. Again, removing the time to generate that virtual machine from a couple days to mere minutes, as you've seen earlier.
Incredible, just incredible technology, Hari, and incredible demonstration. But it's not a demonstration because that's we know that's a real world implementation. So congratulations on that work, and really, really great to see that in practice. And thank you for sharing it with our audience today.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here looking at the chat, the public chat, and we're all very quiet, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I was anticipating some more challenging questions come forward. So maybe we've just been sitting enjoying the session so far, which is great. If you've got any questions, please put them forward. We'll include Will now. He's joined the audience, the participation, and we'll see if we can address them. Lots of information to digest. Yeah, there's a lot in there. I mean, maybe Will, is it worth just sort of summarizing? We've seen a nice little demonstration there of a couple of examples, but maybe we link it back into this orchestration layer that we talked about, before Haria came on the call. We'll give our audience a couple minutes maybe to think of some questions.
Yeah, that last use case I particularly like. I think it's a great piece of work, Horia, because it's so far outside of the typical thought process as to where I'm going to use AI in my IT ops. Most people are thinking, as I was saying in the earlier slides, into service requests and password resets and hardware requirements, or maybe making changes to an Active Directory database and provisioning access. But with this particular client, to be able to say, look, my pain point is I have a bunch of extremely intelligent people who are specialists in their capability sat over here, who need technology to execute a complex thing, and a bunch of very smart IT people over here who can provision that technology to achieve that, but they don't speak each other's languages. Like it could be a surgeon trying to explain it to someone in IT, and you might not fully understand the specifics of why they would need a particular capability. So what it looked like Horia has been able to do is effectively use AI to translate very technical business requirements in, I need to run an application that's going to have a petabyte of data to achieve this output, into technical requirements that can then be automatically pushed into something like Terraform or whatever it may be to execute on that action. And that's quite a complicated thing. You're usually hiring architects, enterprise architects, to work this out, and now you have an AI assistant that is live at this particular client doing this work, which is quite fascinating. And that use case is becoming more and more popular, from my understanding, across the DRUID client base.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate your commentary on that. So we've got a question coming from Andy from our audience, which is, what is the best way to implement an orchestration layer between disparate platforms, potentially across multiple orgs? Think Unilever as an example. We've got that question on the screen there. So, Will, you're probably best qualified to comment on that.
I think I'd be interested in your opinion here as well, Russ. But this is what systems like DRUID are designed to do. And then I think technical audience will speak with a fair level of technical depth. your infrastructure and how you deploy these assets are really critical. Now, of course, if you're going down a SaaS model, it's pretty easy as long as you can get through the internal security requirements of exposing the correct ports and whatnot to be able to enable a web API or whatever it may be up to the SaaS platform. If it's something owned and inside your own infrastructure, then dependent on the relationship with the other organizations, then there's the complexity of creating VPNs that can talk that all talk to each other. A platform like DRUID is specifically designed with hundreds of different pre-built integrations to sit as that central node, and then have the orchestration capability sit on top of it and translate natural language request into, I need to access this CRM, that accounting piece of software. And then the piece to me then is security, but Horia maybe expand more, but DRUID itself comes with role-based access. And if Russ, Horia and I were three different levels of rank, in search of a term, inside a business, or we're from three different departments, we could ask the same question and get three different answers based upon the level of data we are allowed to see. So a CFO might be able to ask about financial strategy, but a financial controller may not. And it dynamically adjusts the data it's allowed to access based upon your role. Be something like that.
So
Yeah, and
if I may add to this, this is where the agentic approach to these virtual agents comes into play. So distilled to its most basic form, an orchestration agent, basically it has the role of identifying and understanding what the user's request is. Once it identifies this information, then it can push what it had gathered up until this point to the relevant specialist virtual assistant. So these specialist virtual assistants can either ask for additional information based on this use case, or can be connected to existing backend systems. These specialized agents can also be connected to other internal chatbots. So by having the virtual assistants, the agents know what information they require, and then what information is required, they can basically mix and match. They can match up the user's experience with the requirements from the application, and based on the roles, based on the geography, based on the structure of the backend systems, as well as the users asking for this information, they can their job is to basically put these pieces together and provide the best experience, the best conversational experience in this case, for the end user to end up and get the information they required from the relevant backend systems. So the orchestration piece basically is aware of what specialists are there, delegates the tasks to each of these individual agents, and then these agents' job is to pull the relevant data, send it back to the orchestration agent, where the orchestration agent can put all this information together.
Yeah, great responses. Sorry, Will, on you go.
Right, so if I just as a quick example, so one of the clients I've been working with actually is a DRUID client as well, a healthcare client, doing this where you have to connect to NHS Spine, you have to connect to a number of internal systems, plus systems that belong to the referring practice, whether that's a GP or a personal practice, and it's all now a voice conversation. This particular example is in pre-op assessment. So you have a conversation with the AI agent that accesses your summary care record, that accesses information that's available throughout the NHS on a number of pretty well defended and isolated systems across multiple suppliers, and gives that single source of truth.
Amazing. And just finally, my brief comments on it: the configuration, the authentication. That's key to having successful outcomes. We've spoken to customers who've done Copilot, and they've plugged in SharePoint, and lo and behold, you've got end users accessing confidential information. So it's really important that that's all done in the sort of pre-set up stage, and working with experts is the key element to that. Great. Let's move into Mark's question. He's we've got 5 minutes, so we'll just answer this briefly, gents, if you don't mind. But how much effort is required to maintain these AI agents? In the old days of RPA, when the back-end system changed a little, the whole robot stopped. I know that all too well, as do our team here. So the maintenance overhead was quite high. Does AI agents require the same level of maintenance?
I don't think so. Not the same level. Different types of maintenance, right? I think if you make a change to a back-end system, it will depend on the connector. If you're using an API and it doesn't fundamentally change the API endpoint, make all the change you like. I mean, of course, RPA got better over time. When I first started working with the likes of Blue Prism and UiPath back in 2014 or so, it would be as innocuous as if you change the hue of the color on a screen, then it couldn't identify the correct parameters to locate a button to press if it wasn't HTML scrapable. Now, of course, that doesn't really exist in RPA either these days, but that certainly wouldn't be an issue with an AI agent. To me, there's always something, right? There's always a skeleton somewhere. And the skeleton to me with anything in AI is making a change to an underlying data set and ensuring that you have quality control and master data management. Ultimately, these agents learn from, we use RAG for anyone who knows about this stuff. We use RAG and dynamic RAG of large quantums of data to effectively give the agent a personality. It can answer questions based on any of this data. If I use a real simple example, let's say we've got a HR bot, and inside its memory, its brain, there is an expenses policy, and the maximum expense for lunch is £25. If you then insert another document changing that to £35, and you haven't written rules about precedent of data inside your data set, one of four things is going to happen. The bot's going to go, I don't know, because it now has two separate and competing points of data. It's going to pick one or the other. There's three, and then there's a 50% chance of being right. Or actually, it's going to look at both, aggregate them, and give you the middle value, because that's what the data is telling it to do. So if you don't, but now, of course, we actually solve for that in putting order of precedent. Like if it was something like policies, we'd say give a higher precedent to a policy that was more recently uploaded than an older one. But ignoring how we would solve for it, the way the AI brain works, the way a transformer model will work is understanding the data, it's the quantum of data it has, and making a decision based upon what's made available to it. So if you don't have clean data, then you have issues. Now, my final statement on that is your data does not need to be structured. It can be completely unstructured data in PDF or Word formats or whatever it may be, but the data itself must have a structure. You wouldn't want to put loads of HR stuff, loads of finance stuff, loads of legal stuff all in one repository, because you'll increase the likelihood of hallucination and incorrect answers. That's where the management comes in.
Amazing.
And if I may add one more thing to this, there are also the agents framework, the agentic capability also lends itself to these agents being used by other agents. In this case, we can very easily build a testing agent to continuously perform, or quarterly, weekly, perform tests of the original agent and verify using large language models what the answers that the orchestration agent provides to particular user questions. And if at some point these answers start to diverge, that is a moment when this conversation can be flagged and the bot can either automatically retrain itself or notify an AI agent supervisor saying, hey, this data, there is something wrong with it. Maybe a user interface changed, maybe the API endpoints or the API documentation's changed. So this open-endedness to the platform allows itself to best practices that can come in from the software development world, from the DevOps world, and so on.
Amazing, thank you, Haria. Just in the benefit of time, then we've approached the hour, so thank you for all the audience that have stayed and joined. In summary, we've had this whistle-stop tour of the history of AI. We've discussed some parts of the UK government's action plan. We've looked at the real-world demonstration of AI in action for IT, and we've hopefully responded to some of those questions posed. So if you're sitting in the audience today, you might be asking yourself, well, what next? What do I do with all this information? What's the call to action? Well, Robotics AI have presented to you this opportunity for a free discovery workshop delivered by Robotics AI with partner funding. It's a half-day remote session with your senior leadership team to scope and identify AI opportunities to unlock those business opportunities within your organization and to assess the potential ROI, safety, security, all those good things. So the qualification is you're here live, which is great. Please reach out to us, book in your session, and you'll get to speak to the wonderful experts that you've been able to speak to this morning or listen to this morning. Just finally, thank you to Will for sharing his knowledge and experience. Very insightful. Great to have somebody of his quality join us today. And Haria, one of the best AI guys globally, and that's not an understatement. So thank you so much. On behalf of Robotics AI, DRUID AI, Accelerate, I really appreciate everyone joining us today. And thank you for all your comments and look forward to reaching out to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Russ.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.